Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar today about our new and exciting PhD programme in mental health research for health professionals. My name's Amy and I'm Head of Doctoral Student Development here at King's in the Centre for Doctoral Studies. I'm going to kind of host this webinar today, but you're going to be hearing from the rest of the team as well, the director and co-directors of the programme, and we're going to run through some of the basics of the programme, so touching on what the fellowships offer, what kind of support you'll get in terms of your clinical side of things, the training development, equality, diversity and inclusion and other elements. And then we'll spend most of the time hopefully addressing the questions that have been submitted and any questions that come through in the chat. If I could ask you to please mute yourself. Most of you are muted, but just getting a bit of feedback here and there. So please do stay muted just so you can all hear us well. We are recording today. Hopefully you're aware of that. We made that clear. That we're recording it so you can come back and re-review it if you need to, and for those people who couldn't make the session today. So I think those are the key logistics. As I say, there will be time for questions. We obviously only have a limited amount of time, so we won't be able to answer everyone's questions about their individual circumstances. So if your question isn't answered completely today in the webinar, do send us an email, or if you haven't already, and we'll come back to you to address your individual situation if needed. Nora, next slide, please. So I am going to invite the director and co-directors to introduce themselves as we go through the webinar today. As I say, my name is Amy. I'm Head of Doctoral Student Development, and my team here at King's is interested in the training development of PhD students, of which we have over 3,000 at King's, and over 10%, around 400 of those are health professionals doing research. And we have doctors, dentists, nurses, allied health professionals. We're a really vibrant community. So we're delighted to have been awarded this training programme by the Wellcome Trust, and really excited about our first cohort of students to start in 2022. I'm here today with my colleague Nora Park, who is the programme manager for this programme. Nora, did you want to just say a quick hello?
Hello everyone. So as Amy said, I'm the program manager and I will be responding to any queries. You will be able to reach me at kato@kcl.ac.uk. That is kato@kcl.ac.uk. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. And we will send you a link to the recording and the slides after today as well, so you'll have that contact there. Okay, so I think I'm now going to pass straight over to Professor Matthew Hotop, who is the director of this programme and also lead on the area of supervision for the PhD programme. And Matthew is going to introduce the programme and give you some key information. So Matthew, over to you.
Thanks very much, Amy, and welcome everybody. This is a really exciting programme and opportunity for people who are healthcare professionals who want to take a PhD and take the time out to do that. So you're very welcome, and we hope we'll see a large number of fantastic applications from you in the next few weeks. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. So just the bare bones of the programme. We will be appointing 5 PhD fellows per year over the next 5 years, starting in October 2022. So the current round is open, and we'll hear a bit more from Sandrine in due course about the recruitment process and how that will take place. If you are successful with one of these, what does it mean? Well, it means that you have your salary covered for 3 years to devote to research. It means that your PhD fees are paid for. Research costs associated with taking the PhD and doing the research are covered up to a total of £50,000, which is generous actually by PhD standards, and travel expenses including such things as covering the cost of childcare and training costs, are also accounted for. So this is a very prestigious and attractive package, we hope, for potential health professionals who want to go into take a research career. The PhDs are awarded by King's College London, so you would be studying within King's College London. It's a little bit open in terms of which bit of King's this is based in. The PhDs are on mental health research, but we've taken a broad view of mental health research, and certainly there are supervisors in other parts than the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience where we as the training program directors are based, and we'd expect most people to be based in IOPPN, but not necessarily everybody. And you would not just be a student at King's, but you'd also be employed by King's. So this is actually rather different from the normal PhD program for non-clinical staff, where you are a student and you receive a stipend. Here you are an employee and you receive a salary, and the salaries are meant to be commensurate with where you'd be otherwise in your career, so you're not taking a big disadvantage. We have various support structures in place, including the relatively newly established King's Clinical Training Office, Clinical Academic Training Office, which Nora is overseeing. And this is really in recognition of the fact that we understand that as a health professional, negotiating a research career alongside a clinical career is complex, and the CATO is really designed to try and iron out difficulties as they arise. And we'll hear a bit more from Alan about the ways in which we aim to support people who have a clinical role and want to maintain that clinical role and make sure that they're not completely cut off from their kind of clinical base. So we'll hear a bit more in due course about that. And then there is an extensive program of activities provided by the Health Sciences Doctoral Training Centre, and a link there, which simply describes some of the training and available already to our PhDs at King's. If we turn to the next slide. Okay, so this is a sort of summary of the entire program, and I'm not going to go through it completely, but I wanted just to sort of raise a few points. The first is that we are all now in year -1, which is the recruitment and PhD project writing approval stage. So that's where we're at, and we're expecting people, if successful, to start in October or possibly February 23 or October 2022. Now, this program is a little bit different from other non-clinical PhD programs in that what you don't have is a menu of ready-made research projects. And this is very deliberate. What we expect people with clinical backgrounds to do is develop their own project and to take some ownership of that. And what we do is, after the first stage of the application process, if you're successful there, you then get an opportunity to work up a proposal with one of our supervisors, and then submit that in the second phase of the application process. So the idea is that we're expecting people to come to this with some areas of interest which they want to pursue, and not to start off with a completely blank slate and not really understanding what they'll spend 3 years of your life doing. And the reason for that's deliberate, because as a clinician, you are making a bit of a switch in a career. We're expecting people to be motivated and self-motivated, and the feedback from our existing clinical PhD fellows was very much that they wanted to see that kind of flexibility in terms of developing a project themselves. So that's part of the work of this this year -1, as it were, to develop that. And then once on the program, there are the usual sorts of things you'd expect to see: induction. We have people going through the normal PhD process, which includes certain staging points like an upgrade report and viva, and right at the end of year 3, the PhD thesis submitted and viva and hopefully award. But what you'll also see is a few other components there. And in the middle grey section in year 1, you'll see that there are 3 pillars to this PhD: translational neuroscience research, data science and digital technologies research, and social science and public mental health and policy research. Now, those are the 3 areas which we have highlighted as being important areas which we want to support in the PhD programme. And what we've done in terms of our application to Wellcome, and in terms of what we want you as potential PhD fellows to do, is to think of projects around one of those 3 areas. Now, they're deliberately broad, but they say basically we see in mental health 3 very exciting types of opportunity. The first type of opportunity is in the bridging between mental health and neuroscience. So we've had an absolute revolution in neuroscience methods in the last decade or 2, and there's all sorts of work which takes animal models and applies them to humans, and human models and applies them back to animals, and an understanding of the way in which the brain might impact on the disorders which we see and treat. So those are, in a sense, fairly science, wet lab heavy, or they might involve neuroimaging, they might involve cognitive neuroscience. So when we say neuroscience, we mean it in a broad sense, but it is around trying to understand how the brain works and how, when it doesn't, when processes are interrupted, that might impact on mental health. The second plank is around trying to harness what's been another revolution, which is the digital revolution. We have vast amounts of data available to us from many different sources, and new digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, which have become available in the last decades. And the idea here is to take these sorts of technologies and use them for benefit to patients. And this may involve using existing data to observe and understand patterns of illness better. It may involve using digital technologies to intervene and help people with mental disorders manage symptoms better. It's, again, deliberately broad, but that's the second sort of big plank of the program. And the third big plank is around social science and public policy. And in a way, there's been another revolution, which is that in the last few years, mental disorders have become far less stigmatized, but we've also, I think, understood in a societal way how discrimination and other social processes can have a major impact in terms of people's well-being, and it's really here that we're trying to understand how those things come about and how they might be improved. So they're, again, as I say, very broad, but that's the idea. Now, for each of those, depending on what you see your project as doing, what we're expecting people to do is have a supervisor with a clinical background, but also have another supervisor, and we always have second supervisors at King's, have a second supervisor with a more technical or scientific background, which complements the clinical. And when I say the first and second supervisors, it could be either way round. I'm not trying to suggest that there's the first supervisor has to be a clinician. It could very well be that the first supervisor is a basic neuroscientist, the second supervisor is a neurologist or a psychiatrist with an interest in this area. Another point I should make is that we are open to all health professionals, and we'll talk about the eligibility in a moment. But what I wanted to say is that for mental health science to improve, what we have to be able to do is encourage people who might not see themselves as mental health professionals to come in and use their expertise in mental health. So it would be absolutely fine for someone for example, from a medical background, which wasn't a psychiatrist, to take up a project here and work on it, provided that project is broadly within remit in terms of mental health. So there's a big overlap, of course, between neurological disorders and psychiatric disorders, and a neurologist interested in that interface would be very welcome to apply. It's not limited to mental health professionals. Okay, so moving on briefly, and I'll hand over in a moment to Sandrine, who will explain the application process. What you see also there in white boxes are the components of the training which we offer. We want to develop a cohort of people coming through this, and there'll be an induction week, and then cohort building activities, which you can see on the far right there. So you will feel part of a group. That's very much, I think, very important for people at this stage of a career. There's also a desire to have flexible training, as well as a load of generic training, which everyone needs to have. There will also need to be flexible training, which is developed by yourself and your supervisors to understand, what you need for your project, and what you need beyond your project for further career development. And you'll see on the far left-hand side in white is flexibility for clinical practice. And it is possible for people, whilst doing this PhD program, to do a day a week of clinical practice whilst alongside their research. We can pick up on this in the question and answer period, but this is something which is actually provided within the scope of your salary for the program. So you can be employed 5 days a week employed full-time by us on the program, but it recognizes that you might spend a day a week with nothing to do with your PhD, continuing to keep your hand in with clinical activities. And we want to support that and indeed encourage it. And then finally, we've mentioned on the bottom there career destinations and support in transition activities. We're very keen, and you'll see there's a 20-month career plans review. We're very keen to make sure that people are supported in terms of the next stage of a career. There's not much point in taking 3 years of your life to do a PhD and then finding yourself at the other end of that, having sweated loads to get your data and write it all up and all the rest of it, if you actually find yourself rather unclear about what the next step is. We're very keen to make sure that people can transition into further roles. But I should also point out that doesn't necessarily mean further roles in a purely academic sense of becoming a clinical academic. We would see benefit in people moving into other sectors as well, or returning as a research active clinician into NHS settings. So it recognises that there are very different ways in which people may make contributions. So that's enough of me. I'm going to hand over to Sandrine Thuret, who will talk through the recruitment.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's just start with an overview of the timeline. So we are now really fully in the stage 1 application. So I put the link in the chat where you can access directly the application page of our web page. And this is closing on the 31st of January at 9 a.m. Then we have the stage 1 shortlisting, and I will come back to the selection criteria in a minute. And the candidate should be informed of the stage 1 outcome on Monday, 21st of February of this year. And then after, the next part from then on is that the shortlisted fellow will be invited then to meet some of the supervisors. So if you have already visited our website, you see that there's a list of supervisors that are interested in welcoming a fellow for a PhD in our PhD program. And then this is going to be led by the candidate that have been shortlisted. So they will be contacting the supervisor basically to match with their ideas and what they are interested in. And to facilitate that, by the 21st of February, will be available some short videos from our supervisor to tell you a little bit more about the research interest they are having at the moment. And we expect that the candidate and the supervisors to confirm to us that they will be partner and submit a full application by the 14th of March. So it gives you 3 weeks basically to find your match, and then you develop the project proposal, the research project, and then you have until early May, 9th of May, to do that. And then all the people that had been invited and shortlisted that have developed then a project with the supervisor will be invited for interviews. At the moment, we are thinking about the week of Monday, 30th of May. This might be subject to change, but we'll put all the information on the website, and all the candidates shortlisted will have the exact dates. And we expect to be able to inform the candidate of the outcome by on 13th of June for a start of the PhD on October 22nd or February 2024, depending of the need of the fellow. So if I put here again the eligibility criteria, but again, this is all on the website, and you will get the slides. But just to sum up, really, this program is for fellows that are practicing health or social care professional and register with a national professional regulatory body. So we put some example there. They are not exclusive. So please, if this is not listed and you are worried, you are not sure if this is valid, send us an email. I will just put again the contact here in the chat. For medical graduate, they must be registered on the UK and Republic of Ireland specialist training program, or must be a registered GP. And this program is not permitted to recruit fellow to undertake an intercalated MD PhD. All the fellow must have completed their undergraduate degree and be registered with a relevant professional body. And then finally, really, this program is to support healthcare professionals looking to combine clinical and an academic career. So fellows that would be looking into undertaking a PhD who are not health professionals should not be considered for this program. But we have a lot of other programs, a lot more actually program that are geared towards people interested in PhD studentship, not related to clinical career in the context of healthcare professionals. So again, you will get the slide and all the links. So I hope this did clarify some aspect. But again, if you are a particular case and you are not sure that you match all the criteria, you think you fall in between, send us an email, please. So regarding the selection criteria, and maybe you are waiting to hear a little bit about that regarding submitting your application if you haven't done yet. Really stage one, if some of you have already, so you can go on the website and download the Word form of the full application form. You don't have to log in and go, so you can download the full application form, you can prepare your answer, and then copy paste online. I would advise that. It's very much safer. And you will see the question are actually exactly related to what we are assessing at the stage one. So we are interested in candidates that, of course, aim to pursue a research career. Sorry, not yet stage two, Nora. Can we stay on stage one? Sorry, thank you. We want them to show a clear understanding. We want you to show a clear understanding how research will progress knowledge within the field of mental health. And again, there's 2 or 3 specific questions where we want to understand how you, what's your vision about this. And then finally, we will look at research experience and potential. And we put a few examples there, but it's not, again, exclusive. So again, you have some question, or you think that you are clear, no, this is not on the list, but this is, for me, a demonstration of research experience. Please put that in your application. If we can move to the stage 2, thank you, Nora. So stage 2, this is the stage where you are going to be working with your potential supervisor to write the research project. And this, we are going to assess at this stage then, the research project and your plan. So we are going to look at critical thinking, and this is mostly going to be actually during the interview part. In the application stage 2, which is now being developed, but will be matching this specific selection criteria, will be looking at a training plan you have thought through as well with your supervisor. And of course, we'll be looking at the project. And again, the form, the detailed form, will be available to you, to the selected candidate, to go through stage 2 once you are invited. And we will be looking as well as communication and engagement skills. So I think this is it from me. Thank you very much. And I hand on to my colleague, Professor Stephanie Hatch, to talk about diversity and inclusion.
Great, thank you, Sandrine. I think the most important thing to get across around EDI is that we're a team, a leadership team that is fully committed to EDI being transparently integrated throughout all aspects of the program. It played a key role in terms of how we developed the program, as well as all of the processes, including the recruitment process. Sandrine and I bring many years of leading work on culture, diversity, and inclusion to the team, where we have been working on the development and refinement of EDI policies across the faculty, at King's, and beyond. And we're lucky to be able to share this with the leadership team and have the commitment of the leadership team. And I want to stress that because our goal is for it to be interconnected, integrated in terms of building and maintaining a positive, collaborative, collegiate, and respectful research culture. I really want to emphasize this. And in backing this up, just in terms of basic policies, I want to refer to us having a very clear and enforceable zero tolerance policy to bullying and harassment. We know that there are current challenges in research cultures, and we want to see a difference in these. So we have a number of resources available, as well as, very important, the PhD fellows and the supervisors will have an important voice, a very central voice in terms of our annual monitoring and evaluation of this program. Can we move to the next slide, please? So our overarching goal is around the development and maintenance of a diverse and inclusive workforce. In the process of developing this program, we identified 3 underrepresented groups that we particularly want to encourage to apply for these PhD fellowships. And these are health professionals with lived experiences of mental disorders, people from diverse racial and ethnic groups, as well as nurses. And I want to just close by saying, beyond ensuring that these groups are better represented among clinical academics, the program will also provide the necessary support to ensure that PhD students can thrive. So we're not just stopping at thinking about, the diversity and how inclusive we are, but actually supporting you all through this process so that you're able to not only complete the PhD, but as Matthew said, go on and develop a strong and vibrant research career. Thank you. And so I'll pass on to my colleague, Rona.
Rona, you're muted.
Apologies, I've sort of learned that by now. So thanks very much, Stephanie. I'm Rona Wasparas, Head of Psychology at the IPPN. And I just really wanted to expand on some of what Stephanie was saying, really in relation to both the research culture and the support and well-being of the students in the program, as well as the training, the broader training opportunities, some of which have been briefly mentioned by Matthew. So I won't spend too much on it. But I guess diagrammatically, the idea that the PhD fellow sits in the middle, you've already heard about our culture, diversity and inclusion, which really goes right around everything that we do and want to achieve. But then also, because this is a PhD in mental health, because of some of our diversity goals and so forth, helping fellows actually manage their mental health is a key part of what we do for all students here as well. So there's a mentoring, which will include both the PhD buddy on the program. So one of the things that we have found in the past is working with PhD students, that sometimes the PhD students who clinical academics versus those who purely academic, sometimes they're slightly different needs and goals and so forth. So we want to buddy people up with somebody else who is a clinical fellow. We've also lined up a number of very impressive external mentors. So these are people outside of King's who leaders in their fields, both in all the different disciplines that we're representing, who have agreed already to be external mentors. So we will work with fellows to choose and pick a particular mentor who can help with more kind of career aspirations and so forth. And then also just in relation to all PhD students at King's, people also get a personal tutor, and a personal tutor is separate from the supervision team, is that they there more to kind of manage issues around well-being, more personal development rather than the academic development. So that's the core there. We've also got, I know there's some questions around training. All our PhD students do a number of research training courses. It's not just a matter of delivering on your actual program. And we're very lucky at King's in that you've already heard that we have the King's Clinical Academic Training Office. We also have the Health Sciences Doctoral Training Centre, so we've got all of these come under the Centre for Doctoral Studies. There's a huge number of different training programs. All students each year work out with their supervisor, and I'm also, and my role as training lead will support that, the kind of courses, training courses that are going to increase and expand their research knowledge. And because we're linking with a number of different PhD programs at King's, including ones supported by ESRC, MRC and other Wellcome neuroscience programs, there's also a lot of training that we can kind of draw and share between the different programs, whether it's more social science qualitative research or more quantitative statistics that people are needing. So that's in relation to the training. Then in terms of how we structured, students obviously join a particular department depending on where they're doing their PhD, and that then includes usually depending on the supervisors, but most supervisors have their own lab. And within those different labs, there's also the broader research culture with different seminars and so forth, which are there to support the students. And then also broader student bodies and so forth to link in. So I'm not going to go through any of these in details, but really just wanted to get you a flavour of the things that have been included and incorporated in this programme to support both the training and mental health needs of students. And at that point, I'm going to hand on to our final speaker, and then we're going to open to questions. My colleague, Alan Simpson.
Thank you very much, Rena. My name is Alan Simpson. I'm Professor of Mental Health in the IOPPN and also the Florence Nightingale Faculty of Nursing, Midwifery and Palliative Care. It's nice to see you all here. I'm just going to speak to 2 slides and then we'll open up to some of your questions and queries. With clinical practice, as Matthew and Rowan have already touched on, we're really emphasising this about being a clinical academic career development. So we're very much to you maintaining your clinical skills, so you can use up to a day a week whilst doing your PhD to maintain your clinical skills. And in addition to that, we'll be supporting students to maintain their placements, to ensure professional ties and develop their future career development. At King's Health Partners, we provide clinical placements for PhD fellows to allow continued clinical activities. And for those who are based with other healthcare providers, we'll be liaising with them and supporting you to ensure that you have useful clinical sessions that are appropriately utilised to ensure you are maintaining your clinical skills. We also work to ensure there's no loss of benefit when transitioning between NHS and university employers. And as mentioned before, we have people with expertise in that area who will be supporting you to make sure that that becomes a reality. But very much we're about supporting your career path throughout and beyond the PhD fellowship. We'll consult with the PhD fellows throughout their PhD to help them identify their future career plans. And at the 20-month point, we will have a formal mid-fellowship review where we work with you to identify your future career trajectories and how we can best support you in that. We'll offer targeted support and mentoring, as we've already heard from Rona. We have a range of people already offered to provide expertise in mentoring people, and particularly around developing clinical academic careers. And we'll be bringing in other established experts. And for nurses and allied health professionals who often face particular challenges around developing clinical academic careers, we'll be doing a lot of work around advocating for you in with your employers around developing your future careers. Next slide, please. In the third year, we'll have a big focus on developing those future career plans. So each cohort has a quarterly group session, and that third year will be focused on developing those career plans. We'll be working with National Institute of Health Research incubators around mental health. Invited talks from program officers from different funders about opportunities available, and from the KCL Research Development Manager. We'll work with you to identify potential opportunities for you to apply for. So postdoctoral academic clinical lectureships for doctors, ensuring that PhD fellows are considered in the annual ACL bidding cycle. And for other disciplines, we will explore postdoctoral fellowship opportunities from the NHR ICA lectureships to advanced fellowships and other postdoctoral opportunities offered by Wellcome and other organisations. For those of you wishing to return to full-time clinical roles, we'll support that. And of those interested in pursuing careers in industry or the third sector, we'll work with you to support you to do that as best as possible. The support we offer will go way beyond the 3. We offer 4 bridging fellowships of 6 months to support to transition into future fellowship applications, and there are other opportunities available as well which we can encourage you to apply for. Mentorship will be provided beyond the end of the programme, and our careers and employment service at KCL is available for up to 2 years post-graduation to support you in developing your clinical academic career. And this is a really brilliant opportunity for academic career, and we want to do everything we can to support that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So we have received quite a few questions on eligibility, research projects and clinical practice beforehand. So we'll go through those shortly. But before that, I just wanted to say, if you submitted a very specific question and it's not covered in this webinar, we'll be getting back to you by email to advise you more. As we have quite a few people on the call and limited time. So let's go to the first one. So this one is for Matthew. So we received quite a few questions on how the research project is identified and developed, and whether there are any preferred topics for the fellows.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. So I think the first thing to say is we do expect your topic to in some shape or form fit within the 3 strands which I mentioned. So that's translational neuroscience, digital and data science, or public health and policy, social science, public health and policy. So that does cover an awful lot of mental health science. It covers epidemiological work, it covers social science and qualitative studies of patients' experience. It would cover neuroimaging or target validation of a new treatment. So it's designed to be broad, but I suppose you could work out that there might be some things which would not fit with that. It's certainly the case that we would encourage applications for any research into any mental disorder. So, there's no exclusion. It could be anything from a neurodevelopmental disorder, and we'd take an open view about, including intellectual disabilities and so on in that, all the way through to disorders which affect people in adult life and later. So we do we encourage a breadth there. We also encourage applications which go between mental and physical health, which is an area of particular interest for me and also Rona. So that's very much in topic. So you could be working with a physical health condition, looking at the mental health consequences of that condition. That again would be in scope. So there's not a particular, we've tried to be broad in that. Can you just remind me of the rest of the question, Nora? I'm sorry, prattled on about.
I think you pretty much covered it in. There was the part whether there was any preferred topics.
Yeah, so no preferred topic, no.
Thank you, Matthew. The next one is for Sandrine on eligibility. So there were some candidates who were interested whether little research experience or no research experience, no publications or no master's degree are still eligible to apply, and whether they're disadvantaged for not having any of those.
Thanks, Nora. So they are definitely eligible to apply, strictly looking at indeed our eligibility criteria. Now you saw that I went through the criteria or the selection process, what we are going to look through, and indeed we are going to look at research experience and definitely at potential. So if you think you really have no research experience, I think you could give it a go to apply, but be aware that it is going to be a competitive program as well. So we will have to look at that, but we also want to see the potential. So even if you think we gave some example, but even it could be informal placement as well. So it's about you as well formulating how your experience, even in your workplace, has been related to research. And what are your thoughts around that? So even if you don't have a formal MSc or formal experience, if you had a role in your workplace, this is up to you how to write it and put it in the context of research, because we also assess the potential. So I would say eligibility, yes, and then it's about you putting it around what you think you have done is related to research experience, but there is not a strict degree that you need to have, indeed.
Thank you, Sandrine. Then we have a question for Alan about clinical practice. So it was asked whether part-time study is allowed.
Thank you, Nora. So yeah, as we stated throughout this presentation, we very much encourage their clinical practice role, so people can take up to a day a week to do that. If someone is already employed in a part-time basis in their NHS work, they can apply to do similarly to undertake their PhD. But what we can't offer is someone to do a part-time job and a part-time PhD. That's not available. So it's ostensibly a 4-day a week doing clinical work, unless you're already employed part-time, then we could negotiate with you about how you'd undertake that part-time PhD with us. Hope that's clear.
Thanks, Alan. And then a follow-up on that one, is it possible to be based outside of London?
When you're undertaking your studies, you will be required to be in London. You will be required to be meeting face-to-face with other members of the cohort, and that's an essential part of that work, and about the relationships and supporting one another, supervisors. But generally, if people are based outside of London, that's fine, providing it's negotiated and discussed with your supervisor, happy with that relationship. And so I would say, if you're planning on doing that, initial contact supervisor, you discuss that with them and how that might work, and whether that's going to be satisfactory for them.
Thank you, Alan. So that's for the pre-submitted questions. So if we move on to any questions that have been put in the chat from participants. So I have a question from Laura about EU applicants, whether there's a deadline to register with a professional regulatory body in the UK. Would that be some?
I think we'd expect that registration to be valid at the point of the preliminary stage 1 application. But bear in mind that this program is going to be running for the next 5 years, with intakes over the next 5 years. So if you're not quite there yet this time round, there will be further opportunities.
And then there was a clarification on where would you be employed for the 1 day a week, please, from Amy.
Yeah, so we're assuming people are applying to this already in practice somewhere. So we would be looking for you to negotiate with your current employer to maintain a clinical role alongside doing your PhD. If for some reason that isn't possible, then I would suggest you discuss that with us and we can see what other possible arrangements there might be. But I think for most people, it's a very current employer in that we'll be paying your salary and you're able to work for them a day a week unpaid, basically, by that organisation. So I think most organisations, to be honest.
And then we have a follow-up on the part-time work. So Victoria is asking if it's possible to do the PhD on less than full-time basis if you have dependents.
Yes, that's possible. So you can do the PhD on a part-time basis. The only thing we'd say is that it's because you're needing to work part-time that you're working on a part-time basis. So what we don't accept is people doing a PhD part-time and also continuing part-time work for another organisation. So you're either with us full-time or part-time because you've got some. I mean, I don't think you have to specify the reason, but you're working part-time, but you're not doing two jobs.
That relates to our next question from Monica, whether agency work or work through an agency would be allowed.
Well, I think it goes back to my two jobs point, really. So no, it would be my default to that.
All right, thank you. So we have a question from Hannah, if you're a registered professional but are currently not practicing due to studying, whether they would be eligible to apply.
Yes, I think that's fine. So I think, the point is we're after people who are, I mean, it's an absolute stipulation. It's not just us, this is from Wellcome Trust who provide the funding. It's an absolute stipulation that you have to be registered. And we see it as being people who are in practice using their registration. I think if you were going, if you were doing a master's full time for a year before doing the PhD, that's absolutely fine. If you had, rather changed your career course and were doing something else which wasn't using your professional qualifications, but you were still happened to be registered, then we wouldn't see that as eligible. But being in education is okay.
Thanks, Matthew. We've got quite a few people liking the question about deferred entry. Could you please clarify the entry points for the PhD?
Okay, so and remember that there are other entry points in terms of the applications happening every year. So our original hope and aim was to get everyone starting in October. And that's good in terms of developing a cohort, and that's when most of our PhD students start. So there are certain advantages, not just organisationally for us, but also for the PhD experience that you're starting in a group. This time round, we've got an entry point also in February. So we're recognising the fact that for all sorts of reasons, the process this first time round has been a bit squeezed, put it that way. So we're recognising that not everyone can wrap up their clinical work and join in October. I think that in terms of a deferred option, if you're really thinking you're not going to be able to start until October 23, you shouldn't be applying this time round. You should be waiting to the next round to apply.
Great, thank you. Toby asks whether there's any circumstances where you might consider 2 days a week of clinical work.
So the funder, Wellcome, allows certain professionals, and the one which is highlighted is surgeons who have technical skills which are which require, I guess, more frequent exposure or use, and that being acceptable. I think that's the exception. So I think there would have to be a very clear justification for that, which we'd need to work out, and it's one of those things where we're sending us an email for a bit more clarification would be helpful. So you have to bear in mind that the funder, Wellcome Trust, are a research funding organisation, and they're paying, potentially 20% of your time to go and do work, presumably in the NHS. They're not particularly keen on us employing people to do 40% of the time, unless there's a very good reason.
Thank you. So Olo Banke is asking about the salary offered as a part of the program.
I mean, the salary costings which we have negotiated and worked out are based on the career stages we're expecting people to join the program. For medics, we don't allow applications from consultants. You have to be in a training grade. Apart from GPs are included, but because their training is a shorter period. So we would, we're not expecting for medics, it's fairly clear there is a salary cap, and you have to be within the sort of ST level. For other health professionals, it's not quite so straightforward. So you could be, have reached the end of all your postgraduate training as a nurse or psychologist and joining the program. We would expect people. There is some flexibility in terms of what can be offered, but you have to bear in mind that there is a limited funding pot, and if we're being too generous overall, it's going to limit the numbers. So again, it's a question perhaps to pick up with us individually if you've got special circumstances. But I can say that if you're a medic who's at consultant level, you cannot apply, I'm afraid. There are other schemes you can apply to, but not this.
Stephanie, did you want to say something to this?
Yeah, I'm just in the time that we have left. I was wondering, Matthew, if you could clarify the point. Someone's asked about clarification. You mentioned earlier if someone is working as a bank or agency staff, they would be excluded. But if that is their only role and they are only doing that 1 day a week, is that considered?
I think we'd need collectively to look at that in its own merit, and I'm not going to I'm not going to comment on that here. I don't think it's appropriate, but we could look at that amongst our leadership team and feedback.
Yeah, and I think they've rightly pointed out that those from ethnically diverse backgrounds in particular are more likely to be in those roles. So we'll definitely follow up on that. Thank you, Monica.
I think there are quite a few more questions and we're running out of time. So if there are any questions that we haven't answered so far, we can look into those, and you can also email us. Amy, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to say to wrap up.
Sure. Thanks, Nora. I think the next question along actually links to sort of some of the things we've been talking about, and is a key one, which was from Eleanor, about if you're employed by King's, does it mean you lose your continuous service benefits and NHS pension? The answer is no. The aim of this, which is acknowledged by the funder, is that there should be no disincentive for health professionals to come in and do research in protected time like this PhD. So what happens is you would, our HR department basically has an agreement to maintain you would be straight onto the NHS pension. You're considered continuous service. You haven't started afresh from when you start your PhD as a new member of staff, and that's important if you needed to go on mat leave or that kind of thing. There's a sort of national agreement with funders and host institutions for health professionals that this is fulfilled in as far as possible, because we really know that it's difficult if you're working to then, you know, make a sacrifice, hence matching the salary and so on. So I just really wanted to put that point across, and that's why it's not encouraged for people to do part PhD, part employment in their clinical role, because it's a challenge to do research, to deliver a thesis in a 3-year period. So whilst it's really critical and important to maintain your clinical links, and if needed, particularly in the skills, if you're in a craft specialism and so on, there's also the reality of needing to get enough research done to have a thesis at the end of that time period. So that's why the funders and why the programme offers this generous funding through a fellowship that matches your salary and so on. So I just really wanted to re-emphasise that point.
Mm.
Okay, I think perhaps we could pick up 1 or 2 in the last 2 minutes, but as Nora says, we will wrap up now, because I'm sure everyone's got other bits they need to be getting on with. There's a question about second supervisor. Does that need to be from those listed as well as first? Matthew, do you want to quickly answer that question?
Yeah, I put an answer in the chat, but the answer is clear that yes, it's okay to have a second supervisor who isn't listed on the. Yeah. So the list we've got is first supervisors. Over time, that will evolve, and we're having a process to we will have a process to enrich that pool. But a second supervisor can be found from elsewhere as long as they've got an exemplary supervisory record. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. I'm conscious of the time, so I think, sorry we couldn't answer all of the questions. We hope that's been helpful to you. As we've said already, we will come back to individuals about queries if you haven't been answered. And what we'll also do is we'll take these questions and update our FAQ page on the website, that we already have quite a few questions with answers on there. So do go and have another look at the website, have a look at the list of supervisors to see if there is a supervisor there who kind of links in with an area you're interested in. Yeah, we'll come back to you on queries. Matthew, did you want to say a last word before we sign off today? Well, good luck, and encourage people to throw their hat in the ring. And you know, the first stage process is meant to be quite light touch. The only other thing to say is that in subsequent years we will have 1-year preparatory fellowships as well. We haven't spoken about those because they're not available right now, but that is another offering which we're hoping to be able to provide, which will give people a chance to get their foot on the ladder, as it were.
Yeah, great point. Okay, then I'm going to draw us to the close then. You've got the contact details in front of you. Thank you all for joining. Best of luck, and we look forward to meeting some of you in the future. Thanks.